Welcome to the Rethink Leadership Podcast with me, Jeremy Blaine. I interview leaders, experts and business professionals from around the world who are bringing leadership principles and know-how into the digitally driven 21st century workplace, with focus firmly on the how-to rather than the what. Each episode is in aid of a charity chosen by my guests, and since 2020, we've made donations to over 80 global and local causes. Welcome to this episode of the Rethink Leadership Podcast with my guest Emma Griffiths. She's an experienced third sector CEO, having worked across the conservation, visitor attraction, mental health, social care and education sectors. Emma is a passionate leader who is purpose-driven and a huge force for good. She's also invested in an MBA, which has aided her development in broader business and commercial understanding as a CEO, as well as bolstering her third sector expertise on top of 30 years plus on the ground experience. Emma can look back on a career of leading, managing and implementing initiatives across a range of services and offerings, always with an engaging and dynamic approach, building strong teams and delivering high quality experiences along the way. We discuss Emma's journey, what can be learned by corporate executives and boards from third sector leaders, and how leadership is being challenged in a charity in the age of digital, new stakeholder demands, and an ever-present fight for funding. Emma, thanks very much for joining me. Please introduce yourself, your role, and the most important lessons that you've learned as a leader in the third sector.
Hi, Jeremy. Yeah, so I'm the Chief Exec Officer of the Friends of Westonbirt Arboretum. I joined there in July 2022, so it's been an incredible journey supporting Westonbirt, the National Arboretum, with its 15,000 trees and 600 acres of woodland. Our mission at the charity is to connect people with trees and to improve the quality of life. And we do this by engaging people, informing people and growing our membership, as well as providing vital and practical support to the Arboretum's management and development. So we work really closely with Forestry England, who run the site. Before joining FOA, as we call it for short, I spent 8 years as CEO of Gloucestershire Counselling Service. And prior to that, I had a diverse career, including roles in education and social care. So this background is going to be quite a unique perspective on leadership, especially when comparing the charity sector to, say, the corporate world. One of the most important lessons I've learned, it's hard to distill that down because I've learned so many lessons in my time. But in the charity sector, it's really that profound impact of purpose-driven leadership. So, I assume, having not been in the corporate world, I assume that profit and growth are still key drivers in the charity sector. Every decision is deeply rooted in the organisation's mission and the tangible good that it delivers. So bringing that alive for people, encouraging engagement, stewardship. So that in turn creates, I would argue, an incredibly strong sense of shared purpose among staff, volunteers and members, and really helps to foster a level of dedication and passion that can be truly inspiring. We have to sort of take the time out to step back and reflect on some of this stuff. And, it's been useful sort of preparing for today to do that and think, wow, actually, these are the important things. The challenge and the lesson is to then translate that into sustainable operational models. So there's no good being just do-gooders and cheerful and cheery. And you absolutely, we need robust financial health. I think the charity sector comes under fire quite often for, maybe not being efficient or being woolly or, not being accountable. So we often have to do that with fewer resources. There's never enough resources. Could be the same issue in the corporate world, but my fantasy is that isn't the case. So it really requires a different kind of strategic thinking, one that balances impact with efficiency. So always asking ourselves, are we meeting our charitable objectives? And that's a key governing line, if you like, for the board of trustees. and community engagement, but applying financial prudence. So it's really about leading both with the heart and the head, having a blend of the two, not letting one overtake the other, and understanding that return on investment is measured not just in financial terms, but in the positive change we bring, to the Arboretum, arguably the world, if I was feeling really passionate. So that's probably my biggest lesson.
There's so much there, and I can hear that coming through as being a purpose-driven leader, the passion that goes with that, the shared passion, as you talked about as well, with that shared purpose.
Yeah.
While at the same time you're balancing the fact that you've got to run it and you've got to do it. So I'm
Absolutely.
quite interested in going down that a little bit further.
Mm.
So you've got the challenges of a sustainable operational model, as you talked about, that shared purpose, very mission driven in
Mm.
terms of what you need to do. So how does that translate into the day-to-day running of FOA? And how might that be different from, let's say, from where I am in the corporate world?
So in leadership terms, I would say it's quite distinct in a few ways. Firstly, probably stakeholder management is very broad and it's very nuanced, particularly being a Friends of charity. A Friends of charity has slightly different setup to a charity in terms of its sole purpose is to operate in support of another entity. That in itself, the fact that Forestry England run the site and we are, as I like to call it, the professional cheerleaders, it's really complicated. It's really complex. And I think when I left the world of sort of mental health and therapy and thought I understood really well about psychodynamics and relationship building and communication, I never, ever for a minute thought I would be drawing so heavily on all of that experience in shaping those stakeholder relationships. And that was really the primary objective, was to get in there, get under the skin of it, make sense of it, and then help everybody else to make sense of that too. Because you start to lose focus on that and things can quickly go slightly wrong, or at least become problematic. Beyond sort of staff and trustees, we're now over 39,000 members and supporters. So an awful lot of people to try and keep engaged on limited budget and resource. I've mentioned Forestry England as our key partners, and then within that we've also got a range of community groups that we engage with to try and encourage people over to the Arboretum and support them to engage. Volunteers, Forestry England have an army of over 300 volunteers that help run the site, and I think their staff number is around about 70 or 80. So that gives you an idea as to how important that army of volunteers are. We need to keep them engaged to get our message out. I've only got 12 people in my team, and we can talk to our 39,000 members if they'll listen through newsletters and website and social media, but it's that interaction that really counts. So yeah, it requires a really highly collaborative and inclusive leadership style. Listening, building consensus is really important. Sometimes it can slow things down because we do have to balance very diverse interests. And again, with the sort of foundation of ensuring that our actions align with both our charitable aims and the needs of the Arboretum. So it's this, I have this sort of spider diagram in my head of it all. Another difference is the reliance on fundraising and membership. So our two key income streams are primarily membership, but increasingly fundraising. And that's a benefit of having a Friends of charity, is with our charitable status, we can do the fundraising. So we don't necessarily have, like a corporate entity, revenue streams from sales, other than we do run the gift shop. but we've got a limited audience there, but we're doing very well with our shop. You must come and visit when you're next on site. Our financial stability then is really dependent on the generosity of members and donors. If there was an appetite change in people visiting the Arboretum, they all dropped off, and there's a change in the funding landscape, we're pretty limited in financially what we can offer. So a significant portion of my leadership and time is really focused on fostering strong relationships, communicating our impact, and demonstrating our value. It can, that can be sometimes a little bit worrying. I feel like I'm always jumping up and down and saying, "Yeah, we're great, we're really valuable, we're worth it," honestly, But that's where we have to put the energy. So yeah, that constant cycle of engagement and stewardship. And it's paying off. So over the last 3 years, our income has grown. It was 1.98 million in 2022, and we're now at 2.40 million by the end of 2024. So I think that the things I can pinpoint that have made that happen, aside from the obvious successes of fundraising, is really around the engagement, the quality of that collaboration with Forestry England, and how we articulate ourselves. We've got a long way to go. We're not doing it perfectly, but it's getting there. And the payoffs of all of that then are pretty immense. We get to witness the direct impact of our work. I can step out of my office and I see families connected with nature. I hear about the amazing conservation work that Forestry England are doing, going off collecting seeds from remote corners of the world of trees otherwise thought extinct, and bringing them back to the Arboretum, and working in partnership with places like Kew and Edinburgh Botanical Gardens. And those stories are just mind-blowing. And there's so much that Forestry England do. They could never really bring it all alive. So we try and support that as well. And the other work that goes on is with conservation in terms of looking ahead, is around climate change research. So we've just seen a really hot summer. There's no watering of trees going on. People walking around with watering cans. Those trees have got to survive. And there's a lot of research going on into looking at which trees can weather these changes and extremes in climate, and informing forestry research on some of that, and more broadly than that as well. We're funding at the minute a PhD student who's doing research into tree health and things like that. So there's ways that we can. Unfortunately, I don't get to go on the seed collecting trips, but there's ways that we can support. So there's a genuine sense there of collective ownership and pride in what we do, and the work then feels deeply meaningful. As I mentioned, the downsides of that, resource constraints, and I don't know, Jeremy, you probably tell me that corporate world has the same issue. My fancy is that it doesn't. You just chuck staff in when you need it. But we have, as I said, a really lean team. Every single pound that we can get our fingers on has to be maximised against that impact. And it can lead to really sort of difficult decisions being made, maybe not being able to do what we want to do, or support Forestry England to do what we know that they can do so well, or having to come up with really innovative solutions. So we're pretty good at that as well. And then, when your work is so closely tied to causes that you believe in, the emotional investment can be higher. I think I've always worked in the charity voluntary sector, so I don't understand being motivated, definitely not by money or by other things. And I think that's really life affirming. And with a strong belief in your mission, you can navigate all of this.
Brings me back actually to the word stewardship that you talked about before. Everything that you keep saying reinforces that point and makes leading in this sector and in other sectors like it as well a real force for the greater good. Would you agree with that?
Absolutely. And, and I think this is where maybe the voluntary sector, the charity sector, I think people get tired of hearing about the need of charities, and it can sometimes be really hard to find fresh ways of articulating the impact.
Yeah, I suppose it can. And while having said that, though, that also links to the other very key point that you made around stakeholder management being
Yeah,
so critically important to
yeah.
what you're doing, to your fundraising, the fact that you've been able to add over 500,000 onto that over the past few years as well.
Mm, mm,
You've got Forest England, the volunteers, you've got the Arboretum itself, the 39,000 members, the this, that, and the other. And you're constantly having to find new messages and new
mm.
ways of engaging them. And I would say that's a similar challenge
Yeah,
to any business, really.
yeah.
But this comes with a very human heart and a very human center, it strikes me.
Mm. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And I'm sat here already feeling a bit guilty about the fact that my marketing manager's got so much to do and not much resource. But anyway.
Well, you heard it here first, folks. It looks like the marketing manager is going to have a call after this. So how can I help from this very caring leader? Is that right, Emma?
Yeah, I might suggest she goes for a walk around the Arboretum
That's
and
it. Yeah, yeah,
reflects
exactly.
on life and appreciates what
Um,
she's.
the other thing I'm interested in is because you've got such a diverse portfolio, or not portfolio, but diverse group of stakeholders
Mm,
within there, and in still in in most parts of the world, we're still championing the notion of a diverse
mm,
workforce, and the diversity of thinking, which is really important in that. But of course, what we do know, and certainly from me being in a little bit in tech and a little bit in kind of the corporate world, is that
mm.
gender diversity is still one of those biggest levers to pull to
Yeah.
make a difference. What's it like in your environment and your ecosphere, in gender diversity and inclusion terms? And is there anything that the corporate world can learn from?
Yeah, well, that is an interesting one because my experience with gender diversity and inclusion in the charity sector, particularly at FO and at Gloucestershire Counselling Service, has been largely positive. But I think that's possibly because the sector tends to have a higher representation of women in leadership roles compared to many corporate roles. So I maybe haven't experienced as much of a challenge in my drive to rise up the ranks, if you like. Um, I think the sector tends to naturally foster more inclusive discussions and decision making processes. Probably more so in some of my previous, in mental health and working, more around sort of community based charities, because there is a big expectation around service user engagement as stakeholders. At FOA, we've got a diverse team in terms of personalities. We've got a strong emphasis on sort of creating an equitable and supportive environment. And I suppose that's something I am enjoying, is because it's quite a small team. I've got more time to sort of get under the bonnet of that and sort of shape and nurture it. Whereas previously I had quite big teams and things can get a bit lost. Um, so that's interesting. We lack men. Forestry England bring the balance, um, but we're very non-diverse in that respect. So I'm probably almost having a very different experience to a lot of women out there. And I think what's helped me with that, my early career was spent in a therapeutic community for very, very disturbed boys. Um, they'd all been horribly abused in the first few years of life, very intense work. And, we had high levels of clinical supervision and therapy ourselves. And that environment was very male. It was a very nurturing environment. We were recreating maternal preoccupation in the care of these young children, but it was very male environment and very, very challenging from both the boys and also, in amongst the staff, as to keeping things safe and progressing people through their own treatment there. So I think I draw heavily on my time there. There's not many 8-year-olds that can eyeball you and completely break down all of your defenses in seconds. And the risk is, if you don't pull this back through communication, you're going to be flawed, and I think I do draw very, very heavily on that in terms of understanding others and finding ways of engaging and communicating. So that, understanding of empathy, really, I think, is what I'm trying to talk about. And those qualities are always associated with inclusive practice. Saying that, we're not without the need for development. The charity sector, like any other, can sometimes fall into traditional patterns, and it's crucial to actively challenge that. I think where we are, we can sometimes feel a bit like we're in a bubble in this, the beauty of the Arboretum, and you can end up wanting to be around people that think like you and talk like you. But yeah, we try and keep a weight to that. And I suppose compared to the corporate world, where formal sort of EDI initiatives are maybe more prevalent and driven by external pressures and compliance, because we're intrinsically motivated by our values and genuine desire to create a better, more equitable world, we can keep it alive in that respect. So that can be a strength, but it does mean that we have to be proactive in our sort of self-assessment and continued improvement. And I gain a lot of insight and have sort of my own thinking triggered by that, by networking with my peers. So I've got a strong peer network of other charity CEOs, and within the voluntary sector there's ED&I forums looking at this and looking at what's happening in the county, and so keeping my finger in outside of the Arboretum really helps with that.
I suppose that outside in view keeps you outside of the bubble a little bit, I suppose. Yes. Because I tell you, if I work there, having been to the Arboretum, it's like, I just kind of get lost in the trees and the wonderful part of the world that you're in there as well. Yeah. There is another side to leading any organization at the moment, which is on most minds, for whether it's a business, a charity, a foundation, an institution, and that's around digital. So we've talked about people, trees, seeds, all of this kind of wonderful purpose-driven element that we do, and yet we're in a digital world. It's fast-paced. Your members, your visitors are demanding different things as well. So as all sectors embrace that, what are the specific leadership challenges of transforming for a digital world in your sector and at FOA?
Well, you're right on the button, Jeremy, because I've literally just pressed order on the purchase of some digital kiosks so that we can sign up members as they come in, and move away from the very clunky, laborious process that we've had, which is terrifying because my IT knowledge is pretty limited. And I'm sure I do have some support, IT company support, and I'm sure they've got their face in their hands thinking, God, what's she up to now? What we're going to have to unpick. Digital transformation, we absolutely need to do it. It presents, really exciting opportunities, but massive leadership challenges in the charity sector. We are embracing digital. It's crucial for expanding our reach, engaging our members, enhancing our operational efficiency. If you think we've got 12 staff, limited budget, limited resource, I want that organisation as automated as possible, and so that people can then spend their time doing that important face-to-face engagement aspect. yeah, the challenges are amplified by those limited resources. A small pool of dedicated IT expertise that I can draw on. I'm nabbing bits of time from people. I would love to have, an IT person that can come and help bring to life my ideas and help get this implemented. And then there's the staff training and taking the staff on that change, that change management journey as well. My staff have been pretty resilient with the implementation of, SharePoint and Teams, and me just saying, go and watch a YouTube video, and but we could be so much more. And yeah, if I could just stop the clock for a week, have some experts in, get it all set up, get everybody trained. Wow, how amazing would that be? So yeah, and then helping others to foster that digital first mindset is tricky. The old people adjusting to change. You really see it, I think, with digital in a very tangible way. I've overseen and led a lot of change management in organizations, and I think the digital change, it does give you this tangible thing that people can butt up against. I'm sure you're aware of this ancient book now, Who Moved My Cheese, the change management book. And everywhere I've worked, I buy everybody a copy of that. And I keep saying, go and read your book. Are we talking cheese? Well, what is it? So it's not just about adopting those technologies, it's that whole shifting culture, and sort of demonstrating the value of it to staff and volunteers, and how you communicate that, as I mentioned, the training and building confidence and momentum around it. I can feel my anxiety going up as I'm talking about this because it's so current at the minute. And then the other challenge of that is cybersecurity and data privacy. We could be wiped out in a flash. I'm a bit scared to say this out loud in case there's any hackers listening. We take it very seriously. We are very safe with all of that data, as safe as we can be. But it's such a huge threat, daily. That's a real concern. And again, it's a cost to charities. We're fortunate in that we have enough income to be able to safeguard all of this and have things in place. But if you're a grassroots charity, you're vulnerable, and you're not necessarily able to function where the rest of the world is. So that ongoing investment, can be a stretch for any charity budget. And then being able to justify that to your members or your stakeholders who see, what are you doing spending all this money on IT when there's trees to save? That can sometimes be difficult. So we're slower due to those resource constraints. I like to think FOA are a little bit faster than the average-ish. Happy to be told otherwise. But that's because I can be really agile and adaptable. It comes back to that innovation and having to be quite entrepreneurial and find fixes where you didn't think fixes could be. We collaborate with partners, and tapping into the passion of any digital savvy volunteer. I've managed to secure a trustee that comes from this background. I couldn't believe it when he said he was interested in becoming a trustee. It's like, get him in, come and have a look at this and help us with this. And then social media presence. So it comes back to that poor old marketing manager, who's churning away at trying to engage through there and to bring alive the impact of what the Arboretum does and showcase that beauty, because that's the key to getting people hooked into the impact and to come and visit and enjoy it and get the well-being benefits of it. So we're always looking for new ways for digital platforms for membership and engagement and fundraising and delivering educational content about the Arboretum. That's where we're at.
Well, it's interesting talking to you because I've talked to a lot of CEOs in that sector, and I would say that many are not as aware or even acknowledge as much as you do the importance of digital, the need for digital, regardless of the fact that we've got to get the budget and this, and that very much in one level to the eyes of some members or whatever could butt up against mission, but in another actually is fundamental to it,
Yeah,
because it can absolutely change the member or the visitor experience in ways that probably they've never even thought of because you've not gone down that road. So it sounds like you're ahead of the game there, but still with all of these things on the horizon, like cyber risk, with what we could do if we had the resource with this. And that's the tension, isn't it, from a
yeah,
leadership challenge
yeah,
right now that you have. You can see where you need to be, but it's just the convincing and the budgets just aren't
yeah,
there.
yeah, yeah. And that really, in a nutshell, sums up what it's like being a charity CEO.
Yeah, well, with that in mind then, because you've got so many things that you have to juggle, and yet transformation is going to happen. Speed is driving everything, whether it's digital, whether it's part of digital like AI, whether it's something else. And then expectations of people, expectations of young people versus the older generations, let's say. So as a leader, what are your priorities over the next year or so to help you accelerate success and growth for FOA, but also in achieving some of the goals that you've set out previously?
Well, without banging on about it, to continue around accelerating, enhancing our impact, we really need to be focusing on sustainable growth and enhanced engagement. Those two things are the key things to balance. So diversifying and strengthening our income streams. Membership is our bedrock, as I've talked about, and our income has grown from charitable activities over the last 3 years. But we do need the fundraising for charity landscape changes all of the time. It's really, really squeezed. We're fortunate in some respects in conservation and that arena, as opposed to mental health, which is really quite scary. The lack of funding there is still funding around ish, but we do need to find new ways of fundraising and partnerships, to ensure that long-term financial resilience. And it does include leveraging, digital platforms for targeted campaigns, for example. If we can find a way of that supporting our fundraising capability that is less resource intensive, then that's going to be a big help. Exploring corporate sponsorships that align with our values, building relationships with business. I think we've got a huge amount that we can offer business and corporates. Some in some respects from the learnings of how we operate, but also the environment that we're in, and I think that's something that I'm keen to get some resource against. Our income from our other trading activities has seen significant growth with the shop. We took the shop on just as COVID started, which is like a really bad time to step into retail. But we've turned that around, and we've reached now I think it's 526k in growth and income there, and we need to keep building on that. There's other things we can be doing around online shops, building a brand and working with Forestry England, around those areas. We're just about to launch Westonbirt gin, and we haven't pinned the actual name down yet, but we've got a company in today who are collecting botanicals from the Arboretum to then produce small batch produce some gin, which we can then have labeled up as Arboretum gin. So we're always looking for different ways that we can bring the Arboretum alive, generate some income that we can give back to Forestry England in grants to make things happen. I suppose I'm always after engaging our existing members, goes without saying, but attracting new ones. It's our 40th year as a charity. It would be amazing to tip over that 40 members mark in our 40th year, just because it's neat, So, enhancing the member experience and offering, more exclusive content, maybe in events, or trying to really clearly articulate the value. I've got lots of ideas about how we can do that, and then showcasing the beauty of the Arboretum and the vital conservation work. From a personal leadership perspective, I'm now, having been there 3 years, and I just completed my MBA at the point where I joined the charity. I think it's that I always think you work in a 3-year cycle, don't you? That first year, you're just finding out, second year, and then third year beginning to sort of establish and build things. I've got a really good team around me, and I'm really excited about the next few years, how I can nurture and develop them, and we can make some of this things happen. And the thing I'm focusing on personally is really around how I develop the team to foster a culture of innovation, because that's the key. We could just sit there in the trees and do our membership and do a bit of fundraising, but if we're really going to add value and take it to the next level, innovation is where it's going to happen. And that's going to involve investing in professional development and empowering staff to take ownership, encouraging a mindset of continuous learning. I've always been a continuous learner. I believe really passionately about lifelong education and development and improving yourself and others. And then continuing to strengthen our partnership with Forestry England, because together we can achieve so much more. We add huge value to them, and we couldn't do it without the value that they add. So those are sort of two big ones. And I think the other thing that's exciting is, as I mentioned, around climate change, conservation. We should all be a bit worried about this. Addressing some of those global challenges, the loss of biodiversity. I've got a huge amount of apples on my apple trees in my garden this year. If you've got fruit trees, yours will be heavily laden. And somebody sadly told me at work that it's because the trees think they're going to die, and they chuck out as much seed as possible. Now, I don't know if that's true, but it's like, oh my word, this is real in my garden. So Westonbirt isn't just a beautiful place; it's a living laboratory and a vital educational resource. And I want to ensure that the charity really plays a prominent role in promoting that work and bringing it alive and inspiring more people to connect with the trees. Well, I think that's enough.
It's great. Well, there's a couple of things. First of all, that diversification and that innovating to diversify, the more people involved, the better. I love the challenge that you've set there around 40,000 members in the 40th year. And I think maybe we can get that message out in this network and on the socials to get some people involved. And if you've never visited Westonbirt Arboretum in the south of the Cotswolds here in the UK, you need to do so.
And I think, sorry, Joe, I think even if you don't visit, become a member, because you're supporting all of this stuff. It's dirt cheap, it's cheaper than buying yourself a coffee every week or something. And you'll hear about this amazing work.
There you go. So we have come to the end of our conversation, and I thank you for sharing so deeply and openly, Emma, around that. So let's just get back to that. How do those tuning in find out more about FOA, get a membership, get involved, and connect with you?
Yeah, well, thanks for having me, Jeremy. It's been really lovely chatting to you, actually, despite the trepidation before. But yeah, to connect, I'm on LinkedIn, Emma Griffiths, MBA. For the Friends of Westonbirt Arboretum, our website is foa.org.uk, so fowa.org.uk. We've got blogs on there, so search the blogs. There's a huge amount of information, but go to the membership page first, and that's best place to start. We're active on social media, so on Facebook and Instagram. Search for Friends of Westonbirt Arboretum, And yeah, on there we regularly share updates and really beautiful images of the Arboretum and stories of what's going on there. And we'd love people to join that community, whether they're members or not. We'd really love people to have a taster of it, even if you can't visit.
Well, thank you so much again for sharing. Emma Griffiths, thanks for joining me.
Thank you for having me.
Thanks for tuning in to the Rethink Leadership Podcast with me, Jeremy Blaine. Please like, comment and support us on your favourite platform, and subscribe to our YouTube channel where you can watch as well as listen to each episode.